Rural Connectivity Group is looking to work with rural New Zealand to make sure that we deliver the right outcomes to the right people using the skills, the capability, and the dollars that have been put at our disposal. And we can't do that alone, and we're not trying to do that alone. So I'm happy to share with you who we are and what we've been doing. And please, we are totally open to conversation, but understand, as Minister Curran outlined, there's some really tight timelines on what we're looking to do. We don't actually have the ability to stop, rethink, go backwards. What we do have to have the ability is to be agile and adaptable and recognise that the network that the Rural Connectivity Group is looking to build is going to be around for the next 20, 25 years. How do we want it to evolve? Where do we start? Where do we take it? This is not a project of work that will be over in 3 to 4 years, pat on the back, go away. We've been asked to build a network that is going to sustain, a network that will be leveraged upon by service providers, by WISPs, more importantly by those who live in rural New Zealand. Everybody who's in the room today has an obligation by being in this room today to help rural New Zealand do the best with what we've been asked to do. It's a cop-out to turn around and say, you got it wrong. I ask you, please, help me and my team get it right for rural New Zealand. So we were established not quite a year ago, and it's a mobile network we're building. It was predicated on mobile broadband, but it will be delivering, of course, mobile connectivity. And as we saw on a number of the earlier presentations, connectivity across a rural business, and I'm not going to use the word farm because we have to think broader than farm, please, but across a mobile business doesn't mean to the farm gate, doesn't mean to the farm house. It means to the business. Whether they're operating a milking shed, whether they've got a sharing shed, whether they're doing cropping and they're going to have vehicles and people in different parts of the farm at different times of the year, whether it's a forestry operation, whether it's a rural tourist location. There's a number of different aspects that can be rural business, and connectivity to all of those is important. The RCG came together because it was too expensive, it was uneconomic for any individual party to deliver rural connectivity. It's an unfortunate fact. So it's taken a public-private partnership to bring this together. You could argue that it could have been 100% funded by government, but I actually think a public-private partnership is a much more effective and efficient use of the taxpayer money. Let's get as much out of the public sector as we can along the way. And as I said, we're doing more than just delivering capability to a few farms. There are 34,000 properties, what we call eligible end users, that this program is set up to address. But it's much more than that. We're expected to cover 1,000 kilometres of state highway, because whether we like it or not, New Zealanders, tourists, visitors to New Zealand tend to die on rural roads. And if there's one thing that I hope to take out of this program when it's finished, is to make sure there's more connectivity in the right places and it has a meaningful difference in terms of the road toll. Because that road between Fox and Makarora that runs through Haast, which is approximately 250 kilometres with no coverage, means if there's an accident on that highway, the chances of getting emergency services to an injured person in that golden hour are very, very slim. So I want to make a meaningful difference in the safety of everybody who's travelling on rural roads as well. And then we all want to sell New Zealand. We love it. Great country. Beautiful. So we will be doing 100 tourist spots as well so that people can share what is so spectacular about this place that we call Aotearoa. The funding, as I said, is public-private. So there's 150 million of your hard-earned taxpayer dollars that are being put towards this program. There's 75 million coming in from the mobile network operators, plus the mobile network operators are providing all of their spectrum. And please, anybody here want to tell me how cheap spectrum is? They're providing it so that we can deliver significant bandwidth to these rural businesses. They're also paying for the operating cost of the 400 sites. And these sites are not free to operate. We have power costs, we have lease costs, we have a number of costs that have to be paid by the mobile network operators as well. So, thank you Vodafone, Spark and 2 Degrees. Yes, you've put your hands in your pockets as well. And yes, they expect to get some money out of this. It's not for free. But to be blunt, without the public-private approach that's been taken, it's very hard to see that it would have got done, and certainly get done in the relatively short time frame that we've been given, apparently an even shorter time frame. Thank you, Minister Curran, this morning. But we're not going to get there unless we get creative and innovative. And that's the other part which I want to reach out to yourselves. Rural New Zealand, number 8 fencing wire New Zealand, businesses in rural New Zealand have been finding creative ways to do things for years because they've had to. I will beg, borrow, steal, partner with anybody and everybody that can make my dollar go further and mean that I can build one more site, build one more rural location that's going to provide value to one more community, one more group of underserved people. Because it is all about delivering value at the end of the day. What did you say, Mel? We need outcomes. We need what the Rural Connectivity Group is promising to build to be a key infrastructure element in the system that is required to deliver the services and the capabilities that are going to be needed by these businesses over time. We don't deliver it all. Let me be clear, we are building the infrastructure. On the back of the Rural Connectivity Group, we will be looking to extend power. We'll be spending money with the lines companies to get them to run power into areas they haven't run power before, because I'm sorry, running a network, providing connectivity so that you can all use your devices, your tablets and your laptops, I need power. And for a number of these sites that we have around rural New Zealand, the reason they haven't been built before is there isn't any power there. And then when you make that phone call that goes up into the ether, it has to connect with something, it has to get back to a core network to get to its end destination. Again, the majority of these sites that we're building, there is limited connectivity. The lines companies have run fibre, Chorus has run fibre, others have run fibre. To a large extent where we're going, they haven't run any fibre. So we're getting very creative in terms of putting in intermediate sites so that we can link sites to sites to sites and create that spider's web that is a mobile network. But in all fairness to, again, those who would like us to build it quicker, if we had that connectivity already in place and we had that power in place, I'd give you a much faster timeline to build a network. But it is hard and it is complex. That's how we need your support and ideas in terms of how we get creative. Last week I was at the ENA forum with 24 of the 27 lines companies. Why they haven't been involved with us to the extent that we need earlier, beyond power, is a good question. But it's interesting that a number of them, most of them, have towers and sites throughout the country. we had a lovely conversation with a gentleman from EA Networks out of Ashburton. He goes, "You're probably not doing anything in my end of the world, but, what's happening in Ashburton?" So we pulled up the map and went into the details. And he goes, "That's an interesting intersection." He goes, "I think we've got a substation near there." "Oh, look, I've got a substation. I've run power to the substation, of course. I have fibre to the substation. And by the way, for connectivity, I've got a 25-metre tower." It doesn't appear on any database that currently we have access to. So without having conversations with all of yourselves and everybody else we can have a conversation with, that would have been a lost opportunity. We potentially would have gone down there, built a tower, by the way, in the same paddock as the Blimmin substation, spent the government's money, come up with a great result. It would have taken us probably 6 to 9 months to get approval to build the site. And at the end of the day, we can do a co-location on that site in a relatively short period of time. Thank you, Ashburton. Who's next? Had a farmer at Field Days came up to Merv Taylor, who runs technology for me. And he turns around and says, "I have a farm in so-and-so location." We had a look on the map. Merv goes, "You'll be expecting a call from us. We're planning to put a site on your land." And he goes, "Absolutely brilliant. Can you come and talk to me next week?" Not a, "Oh God, I don't want you here." Completely the opposite. So part of what we're doing is reaching out to anybody and everybody and saying, we're all in this together. How do we make it happen? And where are we going? Come on, technology, don't let me down. It's 454 sites. This is Plan A. Apparently there's more coming our way. Right at the top, that's the car park at Cape Reinga. Guess what? There's no connectivity there today. There's no power. And then as we move down through the country, one of the things you'll see is that a number of these dots are along key highways. One of the areas we just went past is where Tāne Mahuta is. Another one of our key partners that we're working very closely with, thanks to Crown Infrastructure Partners, is New Zealand Transport. New Zealand Transport has a program that they're looking to roll out to do electric vehicle charging stations on New Zealand highways. Like to have an electric vehicle charging station every 75 kilometres. Guess what happens in an electric vehicle charging station? It's got power. Most of the time, the alliance companies want to put in connectivity so that they can join up their charging stations and manage them back at their network. If they don't have it themselves, which we can use, they'd like us to provide it as part of what the Rural Connectivity Group is doing. And then, of course, if you do own an electric vehicle and you are in rural New Zealand, you're going to spend 20 minutes in your vehicle doing what? Wouldn't it be good to have mobile coverage there and be able to be effective and efficient in continuing to do your business? If you're a truck driver, you can upload information in terms of your recent pickups. You can get updates in terms of where you need to go next in terms of your deliveries. Or if you're a mum and dad, you can just call home and turn around and say, I'm safe on the roads. For all the lone workers out there that spend too much time on the highways. But when you look at the big map, it looks very condensed and it looks like lots of dots joined together. When you have a look at this in flyover mode, there's a lot of gaps between these dots. So we're doing everything we can to make a meaningful difference. But the reality is there's much more to do. The question is, how do we focus on what we should be doing next? Because after we've built these 454 sites, if there's money left over, we keep building. We don't stop till the money runs out. So the cheaper I can build, the more effectively I can acquire land, the better I can partner with those who've already got assets and infrastructure out there, the more of these areas between the dots we can cover. Oh, and if you just want to have a bit of fun, yeah, we get to do the Chathams as well. So as I said, it looks great. The dots look like they're all connected up, but the reality is there's a lot of distance between those dots. So what drives us? Well, if we're going to get this done and we're going to have fun doing it, we need to get really creative and innovative. And there's a whole bunch of wisps around there that tell me that they're far more creative than my team is. Challenge accepted. All right? So I really want to work with you guys and work out what's the best way to do things. Every single tower that we build, by the way, we are making sure there's enough space on it for another service provider, for a WISP to take advantage of the fact that we'll have power and we'll have connectivity, and it may be helpful for their business as well. So it's really important for us that we engage with the WISP community and help them take advantage of the infrastructure that we're building for the whole of New Zealand. I have a very small team, but we are an extremely creative and agile team. We will only be successful by doing some smart partnering. I will not be building the next Chorus, Vodafone, Spark or 2 Degrees. My owners have made it absolutely clear to me that that is not our mandate. We're going to get there by working hard to work well with everybody else. And we have to establish regional partnerships. We are not a Auckland-centric, coffee-drinking, Parnell living organisation. We have 4 people in the team from the Naki, 2 from Stratford, 1 from Opunaki and myself from New Plymouth. All right? That's just an indication. We've got Caitlin from Wairoa. But the regional people are the people who know what they need. The Minister mentioned Haast. The interesting thing with Haast, and a couple of key things to mention. Haast only has power because the local community in Haast built their own power station. There is no lines company providing power to Haast. There is no fibre to Haast. They have a very old copper network that fails every time it rains. And I'm sorry, but Haast is on the west coast of the South Island. So we were asked to help, and we said, look, we've got plans for Haast, but it's a multi-step process. Some of our high sites that we're planning to put in to serve the region require dock concessions. Nobody's giving us a free lunch when it comes to the rules and requirements on acquiring sites. And those of you who've built networks know that dock concessions can be challenging and take time. And that's not to say that dock aren't working very well with us, but in all fairness, we're not going to be given the opportunity to break the rules just because we're building this network. And we accept that. That's fine and that's fair. So we'll work with them within their process and we'll find whatever ways we can to make that effective and efficient. So we turned around and said, well, look, if you need something in Haast, we can do something fast, but understand it's going to be an interim measure. Understand that we have no connectivity out of here, so the only thing we can do is satellite. And again, for any of you who've been involved in communications, satellite connectivity is bloody expensive. So that's our limiting factor, to be quite honest, right now in Haast is backhaul. Those learnings apply to so many of our other sites that we have to get creative about. I have to minimize satellite. If I have to build sites using satellite backhaul, I have to start chopping sites out of the program, not adding them to. If I have to continue to use off-grid power and can't find creative ways to work with the lines companies to get power where I need it, or others to get power where I need it, the costs go up. So I've got a nice dynamic at the moment in terms of speed and cost and coming up with the best solution long term. And I know that rural communities have dealt with this for years and years and years, and please, bring it on. So, I think the next steps I've already spoken to. We're looking at any way and every way to make this a hugely successful program for the whole of New Zealand. We're an infrastructure company. We don't provide services. We leave that to others. But how do you want to use our infrastructure? How do we work with you to make sure we put it in the right place at the right cost, and we come up with something that New Zealand can be proud of? That's my request. Thank you.
Actually, one thing before I get into these couple of these questions from Slido, I'd be interested to know, given it's a year on, thereabouts, give or take, and you've already made some, obviously there'll be a connection with Mel today and probably one or two other people in the room. If you haven't already had those in the past, you talked about going to a Lines Company conference just recently, or get together, talking about that stuff and discovering things happening in Ashburton or areas where you might be able to collaborate with someone or utilise someone else's infrastructure. Is there, a year on, is there some sort of process that you have for trying to engage with Whisper and various other people, some sort of coordinated approach you have to trying to connect with people who may have these things you can't see on maps that you've got access to?
Yeah, and look, if this came across as we're not doing anything, then I got it wrong. We are very, very busy. Brad Clark, who's sitting at the table behind me here, is leading our site acquisition team. To build a network, the first thing you have to do is acquire sites. So most of our effort in the early phase has actually been doing the initial site design. And by the way, we've completed the initial site design on over 50% of the sites we're planning to deploy. So over 250 sites have been already through initial design. The initial design then feeds into our site acquisition program. And Brad has actually set up a network of site acquisition companies so that we are getting local knowledge to actually assist us in the site acquisition process. We're not running that from a centralised Auckland location. So Brad and his team are working with a number of organisations throughout New Zealand. Brad's done some serious air miles, as has his team, in the last 6 months. And then Caitlin Metz, who leads our stakeholder engagement, has likewise been crisscrossing the country, working with iwi, working with district councils, working with any and every rural organisation to try and come up with the right answers. And to be quite frank, that work has to continue for at least another 12 to 18 months. The plan is that we will have enough sites in our kit bag that we can actually do some really smart site deployment starting in the next 6 to 9 months. Because we actually, to again be cost effective in the way we use the taxpayer money, need to do our network build regionally. There's no point in actually having one site in Northland followed by a site in Southland, then popping over to the West Coast to build another site. We need to do tranches of sites so that we can actually make the build process very effective and very efficient. So the plan is that we will build up all of this kit bag of sites that we have the right to build on, and then from the middle of next year onwards, after we've had a ramp-up period in terms of our site plans and processes, we'll be building a site a day for 2.5 years. Now, there hasn't been a build program in telecommunications like that in New Zealand for a blooming long time. But a site a day for 2.5 years, that's going to keep us out of trouble.
So just quickly from here, and I guess this leads to the fact that there's obviously quite a bit that's simply hardwired, contracted in, and there's a little flexibility, but there's still quite a bit of creativity and innovation possible, I think, with smaller players around the country, which is great. This from Ivan, who's here today. Is the RCG prepared to lose money in low-density, isolated communities, as many in low-income rural communities can't afford your costs?
So Ivan, I guess the key thing I need to say is I'm a buyer, not a seller. I'm not providing any of the services. The services will be provided by the WISPs, the MNOs, and other service providers. We're building the infrastructure that other service providers can take advantage of. And the network that we're building includes a number of areas which would normally be regarded as uneconomic. So there are communities that we're serving that, to be quite frank, if the MNOs were building this, not RCG, they just would not go there because there is no payback. The cost of Haast makes Haast actually an uneconomic site. So putting it bluntly, we're working very, very closely with MB and with Crown Infrastructure Partners to work out where we should be building. And it's based on their guidance, not based on our determination that we build sites.